What's going on, everybody? With it being Halloween today, I want to do something special to honor this day since it's probably one of my favorite days of the year. And I want to take a look back at some of my favorite rock and roll themed ghost stories. So, without further ado, guys, I hope you guys enjoy the next several stories. A lot has been published in the press about Johnny Cash and his second wife, June Carter Cash's life, but there's been some details about their life that the media hasn't talked about extensively. What am I referring to? You guys are going to find out in today's video. Now, something that may surprise a lot of people is that Johnny and June would spend a large amount of time living outside of the United States on a large plantation home in Jamaica. They would purchase a second home in Jamaica in the 70s called Cinnamon Hill. It was an old plantation property near Montego Bay with a house that was originally built in 1747. Cash had purchased it from one of his friends, and their plantation was one of the few things that survived the brutal 1831 slave revolt. What happened after they bought the home is truly frightening. Now, back in the 1700s, the property contained a large sugar plantation that would eventually be converted to a golf course. And the property would house thousands of slaves, while disobedient slaves were sent to the basement of the house in a makeshift dungeon. Now, it's thought that the spirits of those slaves still haunt the property to this very day, and Cash would even comment on the reminders of the house's rich history in his book, saying, "All that remains of those people now, the metal hinges from their doors and nails from their walls, lies hidden in the undergrowth on the hillsides or in the soil just below the manicured sod of the golf course that loops around my house." I doubt that the vacationers playing those beautiful links have any idea, any concept, of the kind of life that once teemed where they walk. In the same book, Cash would reveal how himself and several visiting guests would come in contact with a ghostly figure of a woman who was thought to be in her early 30s, wearing a full-body white dress. The figure moved from the dining room and headed to the kitchen without even opening the double doors. Cash and his guests watched in shock and could hear noise from the kitchen, and Cash would recall in his biography, "We've never had any trouble with these souls. They mean us no harm, I believe, and we're certainly not scared of them. They just don't produce that kind of emotion," he'd say. Now, while Cash's encounters with the ghosts hadn't scared him or his family, it would be an encounter with the locals that truly frightened them. In 1981, during a Christmas dinner, 3 young males invaded their home with a pistol, a knife, and a hatchet, and forced everyone to the ground. And Cash's brother-in-law, Chuck Hussey, recalled, "They held the gun to everyone's head. They took each person that was there, one at a time, and went room to room looking for valuables," he'd conclude. Now, if the opportunity presented itself, Cash and his brother-in-law came up with a plan to rush the robber who was wielding a hatchet, but they decided not to carry through with their plans. Now, the robbers would spend a total of 4 hours on Cash's property, searching for valuables to steal, and would make off with about $35,000 to $50,000 in both cash and jewelry, in addition to 175 pairs of shoes. Now, what's sad about those shoes is that they were going to be donated by Cash to a local orphanage for Christmas. So what happened to the assailants? Well, they'd be arrested at the Montego Bay airport trying to leave the country for Florida with Cash's stolen goods. It would turn out that the 3 men were part of a terrorist group whose leader was killed 1 week before they stormed Cash's property. Now, the Jamaican government and the police did their best to keep the whole robbery incident under wraps, as they worried about the negative press and how it would influence tourism to the island. And it would also come out that the 3 assailants would end up dying in police custody. So how did Cash feel about the robbers? Well, he didn't harbor any resentment. Instead, he sympathized with them, as he would write in his book, "How do I feel about it? What's my emotional response to the fact, or at least the distinct possibility, that desperate junkie boys who threatened and traumatized my family might easily have killed us all? I'm out of answers. My only certainties are that I grieve for desperate young men and the societies that produce and suffer so many of them. And I felt that I knew those boys. We had a kinship. They and I knew how they thought, I knew how they needed. They were like me," he'd say. So did Cash end up selling the property following the paranormal activity and robbery? No. He would still frequent the property until his death in 2003. And when the singer passed away then, Jamaica actually sent a representative to his funeral because he bonded so well with the locals. So what ended up happening in Cash's home, you may wonder? Well, the home is now open to the public for tours if you ever make your way to the Caribbean island, and the house would also be featured on the TV show Ghost Adventures, which recorded paranormal activity on the property. The front desk of the Chelsea Hotel would receive a call around 11 a.m. on October 12, 1978. The unknown man claimed over the phone, "There's trouble in room 100. The front desk clerk sent the bellman to room 100 to investigate what was going on. A few minutes later, another phone call came into the front desk. This time around, it was Sid Vicious, who was in room 100. He would state on the phone, "Someone is sick, need help." When the bellman arrived at room 100, he came across a dead body of a 20-year-old blonde woman lying on the bathroom floor with a stab wound. Built in 1884, the Chelsea Hotel in New York would become a famous landmark. That was a hotspot for people in the entertainment industry, including musicians, actors, and writers. It's now considered one of the most haunted places in the United States, and residents and visitors report regular encounters with a variety of ghosts, including Sid Vicious. Stay tuned to find out the full story. A member of the iconic British punk band the Sex Pistols, Sid Vicious joined the group following the departure of bassist Glenn Matlock, who left since he was unhappy with the band and all the drama, and his frequent disagreements with frontman Johnny Rotten. More attitude than musician, Vicious didn't know how to play the bass, and only apparently played on one song on the band's iconic album, Nevermind the Bollocks, as guitarist Steve Jones played most of the other bass parts. And Vicious's time in the Sex Pistols was volatile and tumultuous, as the band broke up almost a year after he joined, following an ill-fated tour across America, which I've previously covered on my channel. Following the breakup of the Sex Pistols, Vicious embarked on a solo career, which saw him collaborate with the who's who of the punk scene, and he was also managed by his then-girlfriend Nancy Spungen. Prior to meeting Sid Vicious, Spungen would follow different bands around the globe, including Aerosmith, Bad Company, the New York Dolls, and the Ramones. In 1977, she even moved to London to pursue drummer Jerry Nolan of the New York Dolls and the Heartbreakers. But instead, she would meet Sid Vicious. By late 1978, following the breakup of the Pistols, the pair moved to the Chelsea Hotel in New York. The first floor was known as the Junkies floor, and during the earlier part of their stay, Vicious collapsed in the lobby from a drug overdose. And instead of kicking the couple out, the hotel manager moved them to the first floor. Getting back to the events of October 12, 1978, the bellman arrived at room 100 to find Nancy lying face up with her head under the sink. There was a knife wound in her abdomen, and Spungen and Vicious were spending their wasted days awash in drugs and alleged domestic abuse. Vicious would be charged with second-degree murder, and he would be released on bail, but prior to going to court, he would die from a drug overdose. The murder of Nancy did little to scare away visitors from the hotel, as it still remained a hotspot for the elite. Artist Andy Warhol shed some light on how dangerous the hotel always was, and the couple's dynamic, saying in 1978, "The police just arrested Sid Vicious for stabbing his 20-year-old manager girlfriend to death in the Chelsea Hotel. And then I saw on the news that Mr. Bard was saying, oh yeah, they drank a lot and they would always come in late. They just let anybody in over there. That hotel is dangerous. It seems like somebody's killed there once a week," he'd say. Vicious, for his part, pleaded not guilty to the murder and claimed to have awoken from a drugged stupor to see Nancy dead on the bathroom floor of their hotel room. Vicious claimed they'd fought the night before, but gave conflicting accounts of what actually happened, first saying, "I stabbed her, but I never meant to kill her," then claiming that he did not remember, and at one point during the argument, Spungen had apparently fallen onto the knife. There's been other theories that there were drug dealers in the room the night before the murder who were responsible for killing Spungen. No other suspects would be arrested, and the police would be criticized by some for not looking beyond Sid Vicious as a suspect. And since their stay at the hotel, residents and visitors have reported paranormal activity. Some people have reported seeing the ghost of Sid Vicious around the first floor elevator. And while the ghost doesn't appear to interact with guests and visitors, some believe he is wandering around the elevator looking for the killer of Nancy. Other guests have reported paranormal activity around room 100, including floating orbs and feeling large temperature fluctuations. Not only that, but some visitors have reported hearing loud music coming from room 100, while others have reportedly been able to hear what appears to be a couple arguing. But after they check the room, no one appears to be staying there. Interestingly, the hotel, now known as Hotel Chelsea, isn't accepting new residents and has undergone substantial renovations, causing some to think it's lost its charm. And this is a story that dates back to 2009, and it made headlines everywhere. The center of the story was a self-proclaimed rock critic and what others have called a photographer named Brett Meisner. Not a lot is known about Meisner, but we'll get more to that in a bit. In 2009, he released a photo of what appeared to be the possible ghost of the late Doors frontman Jim Morrison. Stay tuned to find out the full story. The Doors frontman Jim Morrison would die in 1971 in Paris, France, under mysterious circumstances. Now, there's been two versions of events I've heard about this story. One story claims that in 1997, Meisner and his assistant were in Paris and visited the site of Morrison's grave. During the visit, they snapped some photos in front of the grave. Now, the other story that's been attributed to Meisner claims that it was musician Tom Petty who took the famous photograph. Now, keep in mind, Meisner claimed he didn't start working in Hollywood until 2002, so it's odd that he would know Tom Petty in 1997 since he didn't appear to have any famous connections before his time in LA. But I just wanted to point that out. Jim Morrison's gravesite in Paris is a popular tourist hub and also contains the remains of other famous celebrities, including Oscar Wilde. During normal times, it's estimated that almost 1,000 people visit the gravesite each day. At one point, the French government even considered moving Morrison's grave at the end of its lease in 2001, as sometimes crowds became disrespectful and unruly around his tomb. Meisner, for his part, had forgotten about those photos he took at Morrison's grave until almost half a decade later, when in 2002 one of his assistants showed him a photo from the grave visit. Upon inspecting the photo closer, Meisner noticed something was out of the normal. If you look at the image as you can see here, you can see a hazy or ghostly image in the background. Some believe it was the ghost of Jim Morrison. According to OnStageMagazine.com, Meisner was quoted as saying, "I've collected a lot of rock and roll memorabilia over the past few decades, so I figured he was playing a joke on me, but once we found the negative and made larger prints, it was quite clear to all of us that we had something odd and unique on our hands." While the incident brought Meisner a lot of publicity and notoriety, he would come to regret his visit to the grave. He would claim to the Daily Express that his marriage soon fell apart, a close friend of his died of a drug overdose, and in addition to that, he claims people would come to his house at all hours of the night to pass on messages to Jim Morrison, while others would also let him know that Morrison's ghost was also haunting them. He would state, "At first it was sort of interesting to see how many people felt a spiritual bond with Jim in the photo, but now the whole vibe seems negative." Morrison, for his part, believed in ghosts. If you've read any of the books of the Doors or seen Oliver Stone's movie about Jim Morrison, then you would know Morrison believed he had an encounter with the ghost of a Native American after being witness to a car accident when he was a youth. It would be that accident that would stay with the singer for years and even showed up in the Doors' music. The lyrics to the Doors song Peace Frog features the lines, "Indians scattered on the dawn's highway bleeding, ghosts crowd the young child's fragile eggshell mind." Meisner would claim he had the photo analyzed by dozens of paranormal and photographic experts who deemed the photo to be authentic, but none of them could explain what was really going on. Now, of course, there have been some people who have been skeptical of what they saw in the photo, claiming it had something to do with the ray of sunlight playing a trick on the human eye. The photo would even show up in the book titled Ghosts Caught on Film 2, Photographs of the Unexplained. So what did Meisner do to deal with the bad luck? He would employ a spiritual advisor after a close friend told him that the photograph likely came with a curse. Meisner was even trying to find a private organization to donate the photo to, but would claim no one would take him up on the offer. And in 2010, Meisner would pass away in his sleep peacefully. That does it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts on the photograph, and do you think it's authentic or not? Let me know in the comment section below, and we'll see you guys again tomorrow morning.